Welcome to the Crazy Wisdom Podcast. I've got Andrew Burlinson here, and Andrew Burlinson is an an artist, a creative person who's just giving me download after download, and we're going to go right into it. So welcome to the show. First time on Crazy Wisdom.
Thanks, man. I'm so psyched to be here. It's great to see you always.
Yeah.
We finally met in person. For people that don't know us, we don't live in the same place, but it was so cool to finally meet in person. It was like meeting a celebrity.
Only a couple months ago too, and you showed me this awesome new part of LA that I'm really attracted to.
The LA River. For LA River, Frogtown, it's a bustling little enclave, has a rich history. It's a really cool looking place too. The LA River is, for those Grease fans out there, it's where they had the car race in Greece. So it used to not have water in it. Now it actually does. It has water and wetlands in it, believe it or not, with herons and everything in LA, which is so strange. But now along the river, they're developing all of these coffee shops and restaurants, and the local people are it's a mixed reaction to that, but the local people are awesome. But they have all these arts fairs, and it's a cool little, like, somewhat hidden neighborhood. And one last tidbit about it is that on 4th of July, it is like lit up with illegal fireworks. Just some of the most patriotic people in the United States of America.
Man, it's so great. I want to talk more about LA, but we were just having some crazy things come through about cloistering, the creative process, and how to cloister oneself, and how we can't anymore. And let's talk about the history of it, because you and I both remember a time before it. I think you're a little bit older, so you actually know the time you had it, like in a professional setting, or at least a studying session. Can you talk more about what you were saying before?
Yeah, well, I grew up in the 1980s and 90s, so I didn't get my first cell phone until I was 25 years old. And so my entire creative life, the origins of my creative life happened pre-internet, pre-cell phone, and off the record. And so there was plenty of downtime and plenty of time to be bored. I mean, just full on bored. And so certain people that are born with a creative thing, bent or gene or whatever it is, then they fill that time. And I think that's where a lot of material comes from. I was telling my daughter, who's about to be 9, that when I visited my grandparents, my mother would say, "Hey, can you not bring any toys? I don't want you to lose anything." I'm like, "Okay, fine." So I'd go, and all I had was like my grandpa's pens and his papers. A lot of the time, I'd be sitting there drawing. He was a doctor, and I'd be drawing on his prescription pads. But like the toys for me were pens and paper and whatever was around. So you would imagine these things and just became your playthings. And I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said a million times. But what my point is that I filled that boredom for myself, or with my brother and sister. We filled it for ourselves. And now it is an embarrassment of riches that everything you want at any moment is right there. Like you can have other worlds in the palm of your hand, so you are literally never bored. But now you have to somehow find the time to cloister yourself off, to have your own thoughts that are in solitude, a reflection of what you've been absorbing. So you and I were talking before we hit record about, do we completely cloister ourselves off to be creative? Do we just find inspiration from conversations like this, or conversations around the dinner table or the fireplace or whatever? Or are you the person that is very online, who is constantly binging everything, watching everything, and finding inspiration from that? I think it's clearly going to be both for most people. But it becomes very difficult to find the time to sit with your thoughts at a lower gear and ideate if you're very online. I think it's very hard to find the solitude and defend your time and defend your attention in order to create something that has your intention behind it, rather than just a remix of all the other intentions that you're being, whether you realize it or not. I think there has to be some kind of, let's call it an air gap, between some kind of time, whether it's taking a walk or whatever, between what you've absorbed as a person, whether it's from a conversation with friends or what you've gotten from what you've been reading or listening to, there has to be then that gestation period where you take that stuff, you sort of digest it, and then something comes out from you that is all of those things combined. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a difficult thing to say that one is better than the other, because I don't think you can't just say that for everybody. But there is something to be said about solitude, loneliness, and boredom in the creative equation. And I think a lot of people are just flat out afraid of allowing themselves, let alone their kids, to be idle, to be idle. They see it as laziness.
What's the addiction? Like, it's the addiction. The whole social media thing is now, they've got their algorithms, and it was the first wave of algorithms that really focused on AI. It was the first artificial intelligence in 2017 and 2018 that really focused on how can we make this as engaging as possible, and not in the full spectrum of engagement, but the base level emotion. Like, how do we get people spending more time here? And how do we do that? Negative emotions, just some positive emotions as well. But mostly it's mostly negative emotions. There's surprise and curiosity and those things, which I think are really important. But it really, like, we're being manipulated to a degree that is frankly inhuman. And I think about where that goes in the future. And I think AI, although it will improve their ability to do that, to create those algorithms, it will also give us opportunity to disconnect from the internet, because that's the main problem right now that I have right now in my own personal life, is that this internet is this addiction mechanism that is more, it's not more powerful than me. I ultimately think that human beings are more powerful than the technology. It's just a tool, and we need to treat it like a tool. But the loop which brings you in, every time you connect to the internet, you're connecting to that. And I feel it's impossible for my current status, to my current situation, to separate that addictive internet from the more productive elements. And I don't mean to say that this should only be productive, but like, I think there's something in the future where we're going to be able to use the AI to essentially get the work done without connecting ourselves to these algorithms that are insanely addictive. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, what we said before we recorded about being free from our screens, to say that AI is setting up a future where a lot of that work is done by an agent who is deploying different tools at different stages in the workflow, so that you don't have to keep picking up the thing. We called it prosthetic. I feel it's a prosthetic. It's a prosthetic brain that I don't need to look at this thing all the time. I'd rather not. I think that's why the Apple Watch is nice. People didn't want to take it out of their pockets. They just wanted to flick, flick, flick really quickly, so that their attention it was less distracting, was less disruptive to the rhythm of what they were doing. But imagine a day, which I think is coming, where you don't have to do that at all, and you have some kind of anthropomorphized agent, whether it's, C3PO, or just like a thing in your ear, like the movie Her. Can you get this done? Do this, and this for me. And you never engage with the screen at all. That to me sounds great. Because again, it's all the benefits of the tools that make you more productive without any of the addicting elements. And I agree with you. I mean, when I think of the internet, I think of a row of people in Las Vegas at slot machines wearing diapers. Yeah. Like, I just can't get up. And it is designed.
That time used to be replaced by not doing anything, maybe reading.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
And I remember those times, but they're so long ago. I have done a lot of 10-day meditation retreats, so I've intentionally gone and done those things. But for where I am right now, to do that in my own house feels very not possible.
I agree. It isn't possible. And I think the rise of those 10-day retreats is telling. I mean, in the 1970s and 80s, very few people needed that kind of thing. Like, my dad would take the summer off, like, can you believe that? What about that? Wouldn't that be great? And that just seems like a natural pace. And I don't want to sound like an old man, but I am. But at the same time, there's a sense of, I think we've reached the limits of the pace of the human body.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people that want to push that further. God bless them. A lot of really fit people, disciplined people. Cool. You go for it. However, I think the natural pace of life has reached a point where, I mean,
it's hard on the
it's
body.
just pushing us beyond what we're capable of doing. Look at the how much we lean on caffeine. Look at how much we lean on sugar to keep us amped up. And then look at the problems with sleep. Look at the I'm not a doctor by any stretch of the imagination, but I mean, just look at how your body feels after you've been scrolling for an hour. That's all you have to do is how do I feel right now? It could be content that's just the happiest stuff you've ever seen. It could be like puppy videos, but it's still that scrolling thing that's going to give you that bifurcated life. And it's going to give you that sort of allegro pace all the time of like, da, 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 da. And I just think that slowing down is going to help us to fight addictions to caffeine, fight depression. And also we're going to be able to maintain, I think, the productivity. Listen to me, like I think AI is going to save us from depression, but I really do think
aspects of it will, as long as we're intentional about it, and that's actually what we should talk about as well, is the intentionality of it. As long as we make really clear-eyed decisions about the things that we're engaging with. I'm not an optimist on this. I don't think most of the humanity is going to do that. I think there's going to be a large percentage of humanity who goes fully deeply into the simulation that's being created right now, and are not going to be able to remove themselves from it. And there's something we can talk about there as well. But let's talk about the good. Let's move towards the good, the intention. Like how do we taking all these tools. I want to create a movie about Constantine and Byzantium and this really important like historical era of Western civilization that's basically totally ignored compared to Rome. And there's no good movies, and I just want to watch a movie for myself. And it seems like a lot of the movie studios aren't actually creating movies that I like to watch anymore. And so we have AI. How do we actually inject intention into these tools now that the tools are getting so good? How do we retain that intentionality of creation?
Well, I think there are different tools for different steps of the workflow. And so you'd have to engage first with something to structure your time. And so you think about writing an essay as a sort of close allegory to this. Before you write, you pre-write. So before you create, you would sort of sit and structure your time to say, this time is going to be dedicated to this is that, and that. So you'd have some kind of help from whomever, Claude, any of the LLMs that could say, please give me a structured time so that I can plug in. I don't have to decide when I'm going to work. All of my writer friends who are the most successful ones they're very disciplined. I write from this time to this time every day, whether I'm inspired or not. And so, there's a great podcast called Song Exploder, and Jeff Tweedy talks about that, where Jeff Tweedy wakes up every day and records at the same time every day. And whether something happens or not, it's okay. It's not like he's waiting for the divine to come to him. It's work. And so you get up every day and you do it. So your question was about how do we use AI to maintain intention? So I think that if we have AI help us structure our time as a coach, because I think a lot of the time for a lot of people, it's a matter of like I said before, defending your free time and protecting your attention. And so if you have AI as a coach to say, this is the time that you separated out for yourself to do this, and I'm going to turn off all distractions for you. I'm going to field every email for you and every text message you get. And I'll interrupt you if there's an emergency, but you're like fully air gapped in your time. I think that would be pretty incredible to have an AI assistant help you defend your time. But I think even right now you can have Claude or somebody create a schedule for you that you can try to stick to. But getting to later in the workflow, I think you're going to need to have AI that challenges you. And you and I have talked about this before, that I think one of the main drawbacks right now to the current state of AI is that it's meant to be helpful and it's meant to be harmless, but to a fault. And when you're creating, let's get to the harmless part. Yeah. Harmless also kind of often means toothless and vanilla. And so right now, it's not the best creative partner. It's a great, like, give me 100 synonyms for this word. Great. It's like a writer's assistant who never gets tired or hungry and doesn't need any kind of break for anything, for like personal time, you know? But it's like, it's a great sort of, a great tool for getting unstuck. But it's not a great tool for debating or pushing back on you or finding your weak spots or finding where, you know, I mean, we're kind of getting there. I was reading something about you can use Claude to say, hey, is there any wording in here that someone might find unclear? But again, it's aimed at being like super duper nice. And so the creative process is not painless. You know, it's not, it's going to offend you. Someone's going to tell you, I didn't like that.
Yeah.
And that didn't work for me.
Yeah.
But if you're a professional artist of any kind, you've gotten to the point where you know it's not personal. It's, you've heard it a gazillion times, but also it's not personal. It's just saying like, oh, it didn't work, so try it again. And it's more like sports. It's more like sports than it is like anything else, because hey, you missed the ball. Why'd I miss the ball? Because you swung over it. Okay, great. So adjust your swing. That's kind of what writing and art and acting is. Just making adjustments. But like, if you get offended by those adjustments, you know, you might need to rethink that. But right now, I think that AI needs to be, or you would need to train an AI creative partner to be somebody who disagrees with you.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be really challenging.
I got
somebody
an idea
who,
for a chat GPT wrapper, a GPT wrapper, which is to make it a disagreeable chatbot.
yeah, I mean, that's pretty simple. I think that would be great. By the way, when you said rapper, I was thinking rapper. I'm like,
Yeah.
nice. That sounds great.
That is also a good idea.
I'm sure that's happening right now.
Yeah,
but I mean, I think it's cool. I mean, AI is being used in Hollywood more than I think people are admitting, and it's very the branding of it is pretty toxic right now. But even the filmmaker from The Brutalist this week announced that they had used AI to correct some accents in a dialogue, in parts of the dialogue, for only the Hungarian voiceover, because they wanted it to be more accurate. They wanted the people that know that language to feel like they're watching more of an authentic thing. So they used AI to very simply correct that without having to hire.
What was the reaction?
There was a slight furor. It was like, and I was like, you know, people were like, oh my God, they used AI. But the filmmaker quickly came out saying a statement saying, we maintained the integrity of the performance of the actors. It was simply to adjust the accents for the Hungarian audience so that they got the full scope of that performance. So it was used simply as a tool to save time and money. And that's what's, you know, even David Fincher admitted he used AI recently in the restoration of the 4K restoration of Seven. He was like, there was one part where they were missing like in one shot they were missing the shoulder of a background actor, and he's like, well, we could spend a certain amount of money to hire a new actor and shoot this again, or we could use AI to do this instantly for like $100. You know, so he was laughing at how absurd that is and how easy that is to fix, and how cheap it is. And right now they're making it clear very carefully that they're not displacing anybody's work, that they're not putting anyone out of work. They're just helping the people that are currently working in the workflow have fewer headaches, you know,
which is interesting comparing to Silicon Valley, which is now with Facebook. Facebook has said they're building the AI specifically to take over software jobs. Klarna basically said that they're trying to raise on a down round. So I think it's actually like a misdirection where they said basically, oh, we're not hiring anybody anymore, and it's really because they ran out of money. But Silicon Valley does that,
but they're more efficient.
Yeah, they're more efficient. Yeah. And a lot of it could be as well just because there's been so many changes. So it's really interesting where we're headed, the creativity, the intention, how to like going back layers and layers and layers rather than the tools and everything like that. What is like the attitude that human beings have to take in order to contend with this technology so that we can retain the soul and retain the creativity, the creative spark? and maybe those should have happen. Maybe AI is just an essentially like a it's like a gift, but it's like a poison gift, basically. Like it challenges us in all these ways that we'll have to adapt to maybe quite fast. What do you think there's anything there? How do we retain the humanity, the humanistic elements of civilization as we move
Mm.
forward?
I think that one of the things we have to watch out for is the pace of this change,
Yeah.
that it is happening very quickly. And I watched a professor recently say, yeah, people are equating this to the invention of the printing press, but the printing press took about 400 years to really catch on.
Yep.
And so the level of disruption, it doesn't just mean that the tools are displacing people, it means that the pace is very rapid.
Yep.
So what we have to watch out for, I think, is becoming too quickly enamored with the ease of use and how that affects the value of the art that we're seeing, right? So,
the value,
for every new tool that's happened, there is a shift in aesthetics. So at first it looks, ridiculous. And when I presented to the AI Whisperers, I put a slide up where I put a little screenshot of the Money for Nothing video that was by the band Dire Straits.
Yeah.
That was very rudimentary computer generated art. And when I was a kid, that came out, our minds were blown by that. Like, oh my God, look at that video. And it was just polygons. And then I put a picture of Toy Story. And the first Toy Story, again, blew everybody's minds. But now when you look at it, it looks plastic and it's very dated. But at the time, it was very, cutting edge and mesmerizing. And then I put up a picture of, two six-fingered hands shaking hands as a recognition of the pretty funny output of generative AI right now. But we grow to love those aesthetics over time. And so we grow fond of that look, just as people have grown super fond of music that sounds like Nintendo music. I mean, when we were kids, our parents thought that was garbage. And now there's entire industries. So the Overton window shifts, the window of acceptable, like what we think of as, this is our culture, it continues to shift. And so there will be a fondness for this weird AI aesthetic. But to keep I think you're getting at the question of how do we keep our humanity? It's a question of making sure we talk about the value of art. The value of art for human beings, not value in terms of money. Obviously, everything's going to be driven by how much money it makes. Capitalism has completely won, and I accept that, sure. However, what is the value to you as a human being of a painting, of a poem, of a dance performance, of this thing that you experience in life? And if we teach children, if we teach people to remember the value of that, then I think that we will always know. Even look at TikTok. I make fun of TikTok because I think that it makes people really addicted. But what's one of the predominant things on TikTok? Dance videos. So dancers have now had this sort of incredible rise in interest again. There's dancer influencers. There's dancers on the Tonight Show. There's dancers again. And when I was a kid, Baryshnikov was interviewed on late night shows, and that's happening again. So that's kind of cool. Like, we want to see people dancing. So the value of dance has been brought back because of social media. So what is AI going to bring back the value of? Who knows? I mean, right now, I think it's painting, personally. I mean, there's a whole generation of young prompters who are learning different styles of art because they're learning how to prompt.
Yeah, I'm doing that. I'm getting education in art history, because now I figured out a flow for how to make art with Midjourney.
Dude, that gave me chills. That's awesome. I mean, that to me is incredibly, so it is a culture exchange happening between the tech world.
Interesting.
And so, wow, who even thought that talking about Van Gogh would be relevant in Silicon Valley, right? So it is. Yeah. And I think also another huge aspect of this is, I think whenever there's a rise in technology, there is in art, or creativity and creation, there is a reaction and a yearning for the more rudimentary human sound. So you have the rise of synthesizers, and then all of a sudden you have Peter Gabriel using African drummers and beats that are literally thousands of years old. Oh, and that becomes super popular. You think about some of those beats that became really popular. Then you have the rise of EDM, and at the same time you have the resurgence of Americana and Mumford and Sons, and you have people just playing guitars. So I think whenever there's a pendulum swing, there's a balancing act. So I think it's going to be even more extreme with AI, which is, wow, the AI is creating incredible things. But hey, isn't this in-person thing really great too? So I think there's a resurgence of people wanting to literally be together. I think that also has something to do with the isolation of the pandemic and all of this. But like, I just saw a buddy of mine started a poker group out of nowhere, and it was like hugely popular. He had no idea, like in person. He said it was overwhelming, the response of people just wanting to hang out with each other. So I have faith that, look, our biology hasn't changed in 10,000 years, right? So we still kind of need the same stuff. And yes, you're right. There are people that are going to go completely into these worlds, and we're never going to get them out. That's true. That's already happening. But there are going to be people who are going to be like, I want nothing to do with this, and I'm still going to be in person. I need the visceral. But I think the bottom line headline to all that answer is remembering and educating people on the value of art.
How do you do that? How do you educate people on value? It's such a great investigation on how to, because it's so like deeply, like many people in Silicon Valley and technology have a very, very superficial understanding of value. It usually is economic value.
Sure.
And it's, as you said, it's one. So the economic value will continue to be important, but there's a much deeper layer of value, of valuing experiences, valuing relationships. It's so hard to remove ourselves from the sort of neoliberal, everybody is just an economic unit. Like it's so hard to like move out of that framework because it's been so strong for the past 20 or 30 years. What do you think about that in the last 10 minutes?
Yeah, I think the way to get at that is twofold. One, get them early, really get little kids to have a five senses experience of something, and to remind them that you will feel it in your body, you'll feel it in your emotions. If you feel it in your body, you'll feel it in your emotions, and it makes a real imprint. And everybody has those moments of, if I smell this chocolate cake, it reminds me of the times with my grandmother. So it creates these really concrete, foundational experiences that really never go away and give you a sense of happiness and safety throughout your entire life. And if you link that to the arts, that will never go away. Growing up in New York, that was relatively easy because there you could go to Broadway plays, museums, baseball games. It was visceral. I mean, there's everything there, and you remember it in your body, the smells of food, all that kind of stuff. And then the second thing is to tell the stories of how it affected you. So for you in particular, I know you love dance and you love improv. And what are those two things? Those are in-person, very sort of ephemeral things. They're here and they're gone. You watched a performance in a room with people that'll never happen again. It'll never be replicated. There it was, and now it's gone. And it's, to me, if you tell that story to another buddy who's sitting at a computer terminal all day and say, hey, after sitting and watching this screen, I went and watched this performance, and boy, I just felt better. So you tell those stories, and look at where you're sitting. Like, you're in a room right now, you're in a room where people gather, and people want to hear stories from people together. Right? So I think that, again, it's about telling the stories of how these things affected you. And it becomes untouchable. It becomes beyond intellect. It becomes something, again, visceral and intuitive. And it's hard to commodify. It's hard to put a dollar, a value on that, like you said. But if we can say, like, what were your memories of life? You're really probably not going to remember sitting in front of a computer terminal. You're going to mention meals and parties and things that happened to you and to your body. And that sounds very basic, but it's a really strong thing. So I think get kids early, get it in their bodies, all five senses, and then carry on those stories by telling each other about these experiences that you had and offering it. Hey, I had this experience. Why don't you want to try this with me?
Yeah.
You know?
Okay. I just had an insight earlier today. It was a really crazy insight. And I was on the roof, and the roof overlooks all of these parks in Buenos Aires, and really beautiful. And then there's also the buildings. It's very solar punk. Um,
Mm.
and
I love that.
I get to watch all the birds doing their thing inside of it. And then I noticed this one hawk that I think this hawk was it's not indigenous. It was brought here, but it's this really gnarly hawk, and you see them, and it looks like a force of nature that you don't want to get into a problem with. And then it was just like in my eyesight, just hovering above the park, and I think there were other birds around it, and I think this is a predator bird and everything like that. And then it started to lift up, and then come closer to me, and just that freedom that I was able to see inside of that bird with the flying
Mm.
was really beautiful to connect with that
Beautiful.
freedom. And
Yeah.
and then I got the immediately after I thought about like poets, this poetry, this thing that is basically non-existent in the neoliberal economic, neoconservative like economic unit thing. It's
Right.
just like poets are the word, like they're the most useless of the useless class. And I was like, wait, maybe these guys are the ones that we should start figuring. Maybe they're the ones who have the best sort of relationship to this creative aspect that we can learn about from AI. What do you think? Do you know
Yeah.
anything about poetry?
I mean, look, I was an English major, so
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
studied
yeah,
poetry,
yeah.
and I think it is the most valuable thing because it makes sense of the world. And I
Totally.
think that I mean, we have language because we don't understand what we're looking at, and we need to connect with each other. That's the point of language, is to try to describe what you're seeing. There's one of my favorite lines from a movie is Contact, when Jodie Foster finally gets to the other galaxy, and she says they should have sent a poet.
Not a scientist. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because there are no words. I do not have the skill or the background to put into words what I'm feeling and what I'm seeing.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. Interesting.
I've been saying this for decades, and I had a dentist say to me like, "What are you going to do as an English major?" And I was like, "Anything I want." My brother was an English major and he got into finance. I'm an English major. I got into acting.
Yeah,
It's like an English major with language, you can connect with other human beings.
yeah.
It's just that simple. And the specificity of it matters. And so when you see now the way that I think the tech world is reckoning with that sort of, oh, we didn't really keep up those skills. We did, but then wow, all the language got so
Very narrow.
condensed, yeah, very narrow. And wow, we really need to spread it out again if we want AI to be more human. We've got to give it the breadth of human ability, and you have to give it that language. And so I do think that poets and clowns, you know me with clowns, people that are willing to play things that are intuitive and things that are messy and things that are scary and chaotic, things that kind of push these boundaries, that they ultimately make our understanding of the world much, much stronger,
Mm.
and also braver. I think that clowns have the ability to just sort of take a risk and wipe out, and you are not embarrassed by that because I'm still alive, I'm still standing,
Yeah,
and it was my job to take that fall on behalf of the audience to give them that thrill. And so, yeah, wow, that guy just did that, and he's still alive. How brave is that person? That person's braver than I am. I think that often of when I see a band or something, like, look at that band. They're so bad. They're so brave. Just getting up. Look at that football player. They're so brave. Like, look at that person who gets up in front of all of us and does this thing with their bodies that, well, but I'm real smart, but no, but look at what they're doing.
yeah, yeah.
You try to do that. You try to hit a 90-mile-an-hour fastball. I mean, if you're, summa cum laude, it doesn't matter. It's not going to help you hit that baseball. I'm not denigrating intellect. Believe me, I'm not anti-intellectual. Come on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But at the same time, I think there has to be, again, value, but that's not monetary value.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
put
yeah.
on poetry as a form of expression, connection, and understanding. It's just a very powerful thing.
That's
And
the
I think it makes people uncomfortable to think of it as having value. because I
Yeah, why?
can't
What's the deal with
self.
that? What's the deal with why? I actually, I've studied a lot of this. There's a French philosopher, Jacques Ellul, who talks about
Mm,
la technique, and he's right around the 1960s, once nuclear power and all the the grave sort of threat that species was under because of these nuclear bombs, and also the recent historical tragedies and everything like that. And it's just like the mechanization of everything. Technology has a spirit of its own, which basically attracts all the attention. And so there's this thing that we essentially lose by putting all of our intention into the technique rather than the attitudes and the values, and delineating the value of a subjective being versus the value of an economic value of things. And so like those things have all become really, really combined and condensed together.
yeah, they have. Yeah. I look, you talk about when things are made with love, you talk about
That's it. Yeah,
food,
yeah, love. Yeah.
you and I have talked a lot about the pace of creation. And I talk about, look, AI can't make your mole sauce go any faster. It can't paint your fresco any faster. There are things that are meant to go slowly. And when you put intention into it, I do think it turns up in the work. But again, I think it's just that the people receiving it feel it. They feel that
Yeah.
there's intention there. That's an uncanny valley that AI has yet to really. But there are moments I've seen AI where it says, that error there looks like just a total haphazard mistake, whereas this looks like some kind of quote unquote attempt at getting it right. That looks like some attempt at mimicking intention. And so we're going to cross that valley, and that's where it's going to seem, or it's going to feel real, you know.
Yeah.
Dude, I
Well,
got to jump onto
yeah.
work pretty
Thank you so
soon.
much. How can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. You can also find me on Instagram. Those are the two ones I'm on the most. Yeah.
Cool. I'll put them in the show notes. Thank you
Thanks,
so much,
man.
Andrew.